Hey everyone, welcome to today's Powerhouse webinar, From Hired to High Performer, How to Recruit, Train, and Retain Elite Talent in the Home Improvement Industry. I'm Josh Yager, fractional CMO and consultant to some of the fastest growing brands in our space. And joining me is the legendary Karli Budde, a recruiter who's built some of the largest, highest performing sales, production, and marketing teams in the industry over the past decade. Now, if you're here, chances are you already know it's never been harder or more important to get the right people on the bus. Whether you're trying to staff up for scale, replace underperformers, or stop the talent you've got from walking out the door, the way forward is not just about hiring more, it's about hiring better, onboarding smarter, and leading stronger. Today, we're going to give you the exact frameworks and real-world tactics to help you build a recruiting pipeline that actually converts, a culture that keeps top talent, and training system that turns new hires into high performers. Let's dive right in. Thanks for joining us, Karli.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So me and Karli go way back, almost a decade.
Yeah.
Right? So, and what was really great about this, the recruiter and the marketer, and then Dom, obviously from the sales side of things, is we all work together. And when you get those things on the same page, what I was really excited about talking with these folks about was, when you get that synergy together in an organization, good things happen. And so that's why I was excited about the conversation. But when we were working with Man City and you were recruiting, we started there when it was pretty small.
Yeah, I was actually just telling Dom, when I started, I think I was like employee number 40.
Yeah.
And when I left there, I was like up to almost, 1,600 employees. So
1,600. Okay.
Yeah.
And how many of those would you have a hand in recruiting? It's every one of them, right?
Between me and my team, every single one of them.
Yeah.
More.
So from scaling your recruiting, and you had to hire for your recruiting team to recruit for other people, which is kind of cyclical there. You're hiring really top quality talent to recruit for you, and then in every part of the organization. But I know firsthand how effective Karli is at generating a team, generating different recruits, generating hiring policies, procedures, and best practices so you can fill the roles not only with quantity of people, but quality people in the end. Absolutely. But then also retain people. I led Canvas teams of 150 to 200 plus people in event marketing and face-to-face marketing from retail. We had over 20 stores at the time. Yeah. It was a tough, tall task to fill all those different positions. And you at the time, I remember it was you and another 2 individuals on your staff at the time. And we were already we were pacing well above $80 million at the time. So it was kind of crazy. And then they started adding additional pieces because we realized that recruiting was one of the most important things in the business. So let's dive into it. What we're going to talk about is how to recruit and train elite talent, but it's going to be about all the processes, like what's best practices for actually recruiting people, onboarding them so they feel comfortable in their new role and their new surroundings, and then also training and what that leads to in terms of their confidence in the organization, their ability to really wrap their head around making a career out of a position. This webinar is for owners, VPs, sales leaders, literally everybody in the organization, ops directors, people that have to hire people. So anybody who is on this webinar right now should be really thinking about people as a multiplier and not a bottleneck, right? Because people can be your multiplier or your bottleneck, and we'll teach you how you make them multipliers and how you grow your organization. So Karli, when you're recruiting people, when you're getting your brand out there, because it's almost like marketing, right? Mm-hmm. When you first start recruiting. So that's why, this is a good synergistic conversation. This is a great conversation to have. How are you best presenting yourself out in the field when you're recruiting for people so that you get that good response? Because it's all about response marketing at that point, right?
Yeah, recruiting is both marketing and sales, which I think is great for the partnership with Grosso. But really, it's a brand, right? You have to build a really solid brand, a good reputation, and you have to know what you're talking about. When you get on the phone with somebody, they want to know exactly what it is that you can provide them as a candidate. And what the business can do for them. Because for some of these roles, yeah, money talks, but what really talks is the culture, the environment that these individuals are coming into. And what we want to ensure is recruiting isn't just this engine that, tells you a bunch of lies and sells you into taking this job, but really that this is the fluid dynamic, the relationship that we want and the actual experience that they can feel through their entire employment.
Absolutely. I hear from a lot of organizations that I consult with, they're bringing people on board, they're putting all the legwork into actually recruiting, and then they're turning people over really quickly. And even in today's world, and you'll probably attest, in today's recruiting world, it's kind of crazy how fast people will churn jobs. The average person stays at a job for less than 2 years now. That's even if they stay for an extended period of time. And it's kind of common practice to kind of look for the new and better thing.
Yeah.
And you got to present yourself as the new and better thing and then continue to do that over time. So I love talking about this because marketing, from a response marketing standpoint, when you're talking about building your brand, but there's also like review procurement involved in that as well too, like reputation management, so to speak. So it's all tied together. People are going to go to Google to check you out on what your Google ratings are from your customers to see if you're worthwhile business worth representing and working for, but also on Indeed, ZipRecruiter, Glassdoor, all these things. It's pretty important to get those reviews up, right?
Yeah. So when you're looking at your brand, obviously there's so much that goes into it from a talent and from, an employee standpoint. But the reviews are huge. I mean, when you go on to Indeed, Indeed's the main one, you type in outside sales, or you type in, marketing, or you type in, admin. When you're looking at all the roles that pop up, you see the reviews of the company right under it.
Yeah.
And a lot of companies actually make the mistake of not, campaigning their current happy employees to review their brands. And it's so important because in this market, how it's so competitive right now, if I type in outside sales and there's 5 companies that do pretty much the same thing and one has a 2.0 and the other 3 have 4.3, I'm probably going to apply for the 4.3, not the 2.0.
Right.
And so that's where a lot of these companies, it's just something that's missed, especially smaller companies that really don't have a strong HR or talent function, because it's not something that they are looking at, right? It's what the customer, the employee sees. So it's really important. And, some things that we've done in the past to really try to campaign that, although you cannot pay for reviews, but you can make it a little bit more enticing for employees. For employees to review. And what we've done is you can do a drawing, right? So you can do something pretty big, like a Yeti cooler. I mean, what's a Yeti cooler? People don't want to spend $400 on a cooler, but hey, if I can get it for free, I'll go spend 5 minutes to do a review. So doing different things to really entice people to review, because a lot of these people that are going on and completing these reviews are the people that are not happy. And, hopefully you don't have too much of that. But if you have even just once every couple months and those are the only reviews you have on the platform, it's really going to damage that overall average.
Yeah, absolutely. That's on all angles of the business and all review platforms like Google reviews and stuff like that. As business owners don't necessarily know how hard it is to bury that negative review. Like you need 20 positive reviews to increase a score from one star review, right? That's kind of statistically what you're looking for there. And to get those 20 positive reviews, it takes campaigning and effort.
Absolutely.
To get that one negative review, it literally took
no effort,
nothing at all, right? And it's the same thing out there. Is the only people you ever hear from are the people who are disgruntled. Usually that's the only people leaving reviews, unless you have a systematic way to procure positive reviews, right?
Well, and honestly, listen, we're human. Mistakes happen, things happen within businesses, and there are going to be employees. No, you're never going to have a business where every single employee is happy. I mean, if somebody leaves, granted, if it was brutal enough, they're probably going to leave a review that, isn't the greatest. But as a company, it's really important to not only think about it from a campaign, let's, throw a campaign together that, you can throw your name in the hat and we'll pick a winner and you can win a Yeti cooler. but it's also the like everyday things that leaders should be trained to continue to campaign with their employees. So, you know, a lot of times in this industry, we will hire people and then we'll train them for a day and we'll kind of throw them to the wolves and say, good luck.
Yeah.
You know, unfortunately, I see that with a lot of companies, and hopefully through different, you know, partnerships, we can get away from that with some of the businesses. But one thing that's super important is follow-up. Touch points with your new hires, right? So after 2 weeks of training, hey, how are you doing? If it's really positive insight, guess what? That just gave you the option to go say, hey, I'm glad you're feeling really great about our, you know, your employment here. Would you do us a favor and go, you know, leave a review on this website? Because this is going to help us only allow you to grow. Because the more people we can get in here, the larger this company can grow.
Right. And it's almost the haves and have-nots when you look at it, right? Large corporations, large companies out there, you know, and probably most of the people that are on here are pretty small organizations yet. Yeah. They're competing against people with thousands of employees, hundreds of employees, where their ability to generate those positive reviews is just exponentially more. And when you go onto these sites, if you're thinking out there, oh, recruiting's easy, I'm just going to jump on Indeed, I'm just going to jump on ZipRecruiter, and that is one of the first things that these candidates are looking at is going to be, what is their star rating? How many reviews do they have? How much feedback do they have? And if you're sitting there at 0 or 1 or 2 or 3 reviews, you're not going to get any candidates from that platform. And it's not as easy. It'd be like pulling teeth. And you might say, well, ZipRecruiter doesn't work or Indeed doesn't work.
Yeah.
But it was all because you didn't have a concerted effort towards that review procurement. So that's just one facet that's going to be really important from my perspective in setting yourself up for successful recruiting and having that systemized in your business. So with that being said, obviously reputation management, reviews are huge. What else do you see as being important in 2025 from a recruiting aspect, putting your brand out there, being successful in recruiting the best talent as it's getting more and more competitive each and every day? Most people lend themselves to post and pray, and they just hope that they get really good candidates. What's going to be what makes companies successful in 2025, do you think?
Yeah, well, you can never put all your eggs in one basket, right? The post and pray method, it can make you survive, but it's never going to make you scale. So it's super important to really kind of spread your wings and think outside the box when it comes to recruiting good talent. Obviously, you get kind of 3 buckets of people when you're recruiting. You get people that, you know, you have to actually like network with. They're not actively applying for jobs, so you actually have to try to steal them from
usually your
company.
Best candidates.
Yeah. And you have people that, you know, are currently employed and they're just not happy and they want a new venture. You have people that are unemployed and honestly may be unemployed for a reason.
Yeah.
We'll see.
It's usually going to be the case. It's like, I haven't had a job. Well, actually, if and when we bring you on for the role, when would you be able to start? They're like, funny story. Yeah. It's like, funny story.
So yeah, it's really important to really kind of expand your horizon when it comes to recruiting. So you can do, you can post on the pages, but then we can referral programs, right? Referral is like the best way to grow as an organization, and that ties back to employer brand.
Right.
If you don't have a good brand, if you don't have a good place of work, if you don't have a good employer value prop, people aren't going to want to tell their friends to come work here, right? And like I was telling Dom before, like you attract who you like, what type of worker you are, right? So you should be surrounding yourself with like-minded people. And if you get that really great canvasser, or that really great sales rep, or that really great installer, then chances are they probably know people that are similar, like-minded. That could be really solid for you. So referral programs, ensuring that you have a solid structure in place to promote it, but also having that brand that people want to bring their people in.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember a story about Power Home Improvement or Power Remodeling. For a while, they just grew by referrals.
Right.
And that, that it's a cheaper version of recruiting and time saving.
Less competitive, right?
Yeah. But it's also just really cool to be able to say, like, a lot of these people are from
Yeah. And I mean, even going back into the Mad City days when I was really getting after recruiting, I was going out to college campuses and I got one guy. Shout out Jake Jennerjohn. And he's actually a real estate agent now. But, I got him from Oshkosh campus. That's my, I was an alumni there. I was guerrilla recruiting. I was out and about doing that. And then he eventually brought on multiple people, had interns over summers that produced a lot of revenue for our business. But Karli, if I understand you correctly, diversification in 2025 is going to be the most important thing.
Huge.
It's almost like marketing. Obviously, if anybody asked anybody on the webinar here if they were going to put all their eggs into one basket from a marketing context, nobody would ever do that. Nobody would ever do it. And you can't do it in recruiting either. If you're saying, I'm going to run Indeed ads, you're probably not going to be incredibly successful. But it's also, like omni-channel marketing, you got to be successful. You got to treat each funnel differently, right?
Yeah.
With different tactics or best practices. So when you're carving out that plan, it's also very important that you understand the type of bandwidth that it's going to take to follow up on these things appropriately. You can't just send and fire off one email to these clients and expect to set up an interview, right?
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that, early on in the Mad City days, we were scaling so big, so fast that, a lot of the extra channels, we would pull the levers, but we didn't have the people to actually manage, everything that we were doing. We wanted to schedule, we wanted to put together an internship program. Well, that internship program can't just be a job ad that we post and try to attract.
Then send an email. Please respond to this email because otherwise I'll never contact you again.
Yeah, it's actually got to be something that has a little bit of grit that interns can come away with education and it's not just, another job. Internal mobility is another one, right? People want growth. So how can we bring people in early in their careers, give them the training and development, and then launch them, to another role in the future? And I think canvassing actually is the perfect segue, potentially into sales. Because if you think about the type of target candidate that we go for in canvassing, it's driven, motivated, they like the grind, they like the competition. That's the same type of person you look for in sales.
A little bit dumb, so they knock doors for a living right now. I'm just kidding. I knock doors. I'm no offense to anybody out there that knocks doors. That's a joke on myself because that's what I do.
But that's the perfect segue, for somebody who wants to eventually grow. And hopefully when we're bringing people into our businesses, we're bringing people in that want to scale and want to grow the company. And they're not just cool sitting there doing the same thing for forever. And that's all stuff that companies have to, they have to think well in advance about, because some of them will say, well, we don't want to, them to want growth because we might not have it. Well, that's an excuse. Well, there's no reason why you can't have them grow if you do the right pieces to get them there.
Right, exactly. And I think that the pervasive language in this industry was always, we're sales and marketing companies that install products, or we're sales and marketing companies that are do home improvements, which is completely backwards. I believe myself vehemently that we are people developers.
Yeah.
And our recruiting arm is, obviously going to be bringing people in, but when you look at organizations that I consult with, they're taking their marketing very seriously. They're pounding, $500,000 into marketing, or $1 million, some of these companies, into marketing, and the recruiting arm is so weak.
So I'm glad you say that, because I was actually listening to a podcast on my way here, and they were talking about how silly it is that some, companies will spend all of this money on marketing and ensure that the customer experience is smooth and, wonderful, so that they come back to us, but they won't do the same thing for their employees.
Yeah.
And that is a common trend is, you get to this point too, especially when you're scaling, of we just need bodies in the door to get the work out the door. But really where you really need to focus on is that foundation, that employee experience, because the smoother that experience is, the happier those employees are, the smoother your customer experience is going to be. From start to finish, right? So
exactly. So, focusing on the recruiting arm of your organization, not just the sales and marketing, being people developers, that's really going to set you up for success in 2025. The high performance in the market, Karli, let's talk a little bit about that. Because I'm sure everybody on this call, based on data or your anecdotal evidence, what do you think top performers are looking for out there in a company right now? as we move through 2025?
Yeah. Well, specifically in the home improvement industry, I mean, pay, whether we like it or not, is a top driver.
Right.
But I think second to that is going to be a culture. I mean, a lot of home improvement companies are kind of known for, burnout, I guess is the best way to say it. If you're either really smart and can be really efficient with your time, or you're like me where you just work really, really hard and you put in the hours and you eventually get to the point where, sometimes you burn the light or the flame at both ends, and it gets to be hard. So I think going back to your question here, I think having a really solid culture, because a lot of people are missing that. I mean, when we get on the phone with people, we want to be able to say, like, our company has something that this company doesn't. Because in reality, home improvement companies all pretty much operate very similarly. In the sales world, you have a 10-2 and a 6 o'clock appointment.
If they're top flight, I've seen some pretty horrible companies out there, honestly.
But if you're looking at job advertisements and you're trying to pick which one you want to go for, it's really hard to decipher some of the roles from competitors.
Yeah.
And so we always have to ask ourselves in this setting is like, how are we different from the others? Mm-hmm. What would make really great people come to us versus go to them? And then we have to put in the effort. We can't just slap something on paper and say this is who we are. We have to live by it, because again, going back to employer brand, that all then feeds the engine of how we're operating as an entire entity.
Yeah, and I think it was it's kind of a backwards philosophy for a lot of these home improvement companies. They get somebody who's a $2 million producer or a $5 million producer, and they're like shielding them, like, don't look, don't go out and look, right? But what are you trying to hide them from seeing, right?
Yeah.
Why are you not presenting yourself as a place that they'd like to stay? Because there's a lot of poaching in this industry, let's be honest.
Oh, yes.
Like, so if you have a top flight producer in sales, marketing, whatever that may be, it is likely that when they go out to do their thing, they're going to run into countless individuals that either own their own home improvement companies, run marketing departments. I was one of them, right? Mm-hmm. And I'll test people when I'm out at a home show, and I'll have them pitch me as a homeowner. Be like, hey, that was pretty good.
Yeah.
I'll be like, how are they treating you over here? How are you doing over there? Right?
Yeah.
So what you need to think about as a home improvement company, again, in retention, if we're going to go from point A, is just bringing them in the door, being enticing, being impactful, running those types of ads, and then you're going to bring them on. So their onboarding has to be sharp. It has to build confidence in the role that they just took, because they're going to have some buyer's remorse right in the beginning.
Absolutely.
Right? And then you got to, over time, make sure their comp is competitive, right? You got to make sure that everything is lining up from a culture standpoint. And culture is kind of a buzzword out there, right? Mm-hmm. It's, people will say, we have a great culture. Do you really? You have to assess those types of things.
Yeah.
So let's go into, Karli, what typical companies out there, what are some of the biggest mistakes, like on the front end of recruiting, that you see? Obviously we talked a little bit about your follow through and your ability to actually have the resources to really treat this like a department of your organization. But what are some of the other things that we're looking at in terms of the mistakes that companies are making that you're seeing out there?
Yeah, I think, and again, I'm going to be kind of targeted towards home improvement, but, I think a lot of employers, they kind of hire by the seat of their pants because they're either desperate or they really just don't know what the talent looks like. Mm-hmm. So it's really understanding the business. And from the recruiter end, what I think is very important is that those people get into the field and can actually live the life.
Right.
I think some companies, in the home improvement industry will, it's either they're moving way too fast where they don't have time to get people in the field, or because that other end, right, like the life isn't what we're actually advertising, doesn't align. They're scared to get the recruiter in front of what the day in the life actually looks like for that role. Yeah. And so if you feel like if you're sitting in that spot and you feel like you could not send a recruiter out to sit with somebody on that team and experience a day in the life and then not be able to walk away saying, oh, this is super exciting, then you probably don't have something that's super impactful, and probably a system or a process or a team that will be retained.
Yeah, and what I see a lot of, that's a great point. What I see a lot of organizations struggling with that I work with, and a lot of people on the call probably resonate with this, is two ends of the spectrum. You have over promising, under delivering, right? So you're gonna make this like the Taj Mahal of jobs. You're gonna make this the cushiest role that you've ever received. Like, oh yeah, you're gonna make $500 million your first year doing this.
Yeah.
And then you see other companies that are gun shy to really tout the role for what it is. Because like I worked with a client the other day and we're talking about building a Canvas team for them. And I flat out told them, I have had Canvassers on my team make $120,000, $150,000. They're like, well, we're going to probably put like 60K on there. And I go, you can have a wide range, folks. It's like you can tout success stories. People aren't going to understand. You're saying, the average pay for this is $80,000 a year. In top 5% of performers, we're seeing $150,000 earners.
I'm glad you said that because we see that a lot too. When I'm working with new clients, filling sales seats means that we need to start looking for more leads. So we're talking about Canvas departments, and it's like shocking when they're like, a canvasser can make that much money. And
how many times have you heard, oh, I'm going to go knock doors?
Yeah. I mean, I literally just had it happen last week. Someone was like, I'm going to go knock doors, But I'm glad you said that because that kind of leads me into the segue of leadership.
Yeah.
And leadership is so vital. It's so important to the business because if you don't have the right leaders, you're not going to have people that are able to make that type of money.
Mm-hmm.
They need people that are going to train and develop them. Onboarding isn't just a one-day thing. Onboarding is a scope of your pre-boarding materials. So everything that you do after you accept your offer, your paperwork, all the fun stuff to prep for your first day. It's your first day, which is like orientation. So you go through your paperwork, you do your I-9, you sit and watch your compliance trainings or whatever the company has. And then it's 3 to 4 weeks after that, that's still considered an onboarding period. Yeah. That person is getting initiated into the business, and it's our duty as leaders to be able to really engage, make sure we have touch points, and ensure that they have the resources and tools to be successful. And I think all too often we see people, especially in businesses that are growing fast, you elevate just because you're like desperate, right? Mm-hmm. So you create a position for a manager because, getting burnt out at both ends, and then you put somebody into that role. But what a lot of companies fail to do, and I'm guilty of this, I've done it in the past, is you fail to give them the tools and resources to be a good leader. Just because you're a good canvasser doesn't make you a good Canvas manager. But we can make you a good Canvas manager if we give you the right tools and if you have the right mindset.
Right. I always tie it to, that's spot on. A phrase that I coined was know the way, show the way, go the way. Somebody probably said it first. I maybe heard it somewhere. I have no idea, but know the way, show the way, go the way. And it's all about knowing what is the correct practices, right? That comes with training, right? Mm-hmm. Show the way, being able to train people and just have people shadow you once you've got best practices down, but just continuously go the way, which means like you're doing it in action, right? Yeah. There's a lot of sayers and not enough doers in this industry. And as it pertains to Canvas, the most important part of a Canvas program is going to be strong leadership that knows the way, shows the way, goes the way, but continuously does that over time. Mm-hmm. Now that we've kind of wrapped up that branding and tying marketing to recruiting, strong marketing organizations should have a really easy time with recruiting. Now, I don't want to, marginalize how much difficulty is in a program like that, but if you want mentors in that area, that's where, marketing, a mentor here, recruiting mentor here, but it's learning from other people that have scaled successfully at other organizations. But once you've got that candidate in hand, right, it's systematic interviewing, it's systematic follow-up to your interviews, it's systematic onboarding, so that before their first day, they even have a roadmap. And it's moving into things like 90-day plans and expectations, because that's, I think, the biggest disconnect in recruiting right now is expectations are not
reality.
Yeah, you're not presenting those to the client, right? Well, first of all, they have an inflated sense of what the role is, and then you don't deliver on that with the actual substance. So they come in and they're looking around like, what the hell am I doing here? Where am I going? What am I going to be doing?
Yeah, I think all too often you see like somebody that sells the role and then they're, defeated on the other end because they took the job because it looked really exciting, but then, the living proof of it didn't match that expectation.
Right.
Or you undersell them and you don't land the candidate.
Yep. Then you throw a manual at them, you throw a sales manual at them, you throw a canvas manual at them, and you say, good luck, send those leads into this text message here. Like, it's kind of a wild, different, array of companies out there and how dialed in they are. But that's why we always, here at Grosso, we pride ourselves in having kind of out of the box type stuff, right? Systems in place. You in the recruiting arm of things, for GE recruiting, and then you also have the, systems in place once you get those onboarded. So if you wanted to take a person from recruiting to feeling comfortable in your organization to a trained killer, that's what we want to provide for people as well. So let's move on from the actual recruiting aspect and more into like an onboarding system, kind of the next step. So now that we talked about best practices in branding, recruiting, and marketing, and setting yourself up to be really successful on the front end, let's talk a little bit about building a scalable hiring process, because it's all about scale. We were just talking about not having the resources when we first started, but as we started to scale, we started adding resources. Let's talk a little bit about the scalable hiring model and how people would be able to achieve that. First off, a scalable model in finding the right candidates.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think systems tie in a lot to finding the right candidates, right? You need a system to pretty much do anything, whether you're cold sourcing somebody on, LinkedIn or Indeed, or you're, taking in warm applications. You need something that can obviously help that, but then automation.
Right.
Big part of the employee experience is knowing, the expectations of what's going to happen. So the minute we call them and we get their voicemail, to contact us back for an interview, I want something that's going to be able to say, hey, send an email out to this candidate, letting them know that I contacted them and they can book a time on my calendar. So I think systems is really huge into making a successful, sourcing strategy. And it can also allow for more efficiency with candidate communication and candidate experience. As far as like going back to kind of where to find the candidates outside of just the job boards, right? Of course, there's like the job fairs. I personally haven't been a huge fan of job fairs. I think you're better off, like you said, going on to a college campus and pitching people there. Home improvement industry, I just really haven't seen a ton of success with it. And it's just because a lot of times when you're entering into Canvas or retail or even sales, people are looking for a bigger name, a bigger brand, or they're looking for, a higher level than what it is, even if they have this roadmap to go into sales. And it's just, there's been something about it that just, it really hasn't given me any like motivation to hunt after job fairs.
Right.
But there's so much at our fingertips now with technology too. I mean, Indeed offers like virtual job fairs, which we've tried a couple of them.
I've done a few on my own, actually.
Yeah. You have your networking opportunities. So, like guerrilla recruiting is huge in home improvement. You go to a gas station, right, and they're making $17 an hour, and you have a position that's willing to do $20 an hour plus commissions. Like, pitch them, right? You have to get outside of your comfort zone, and you have to have things built into your system that allow for us to be a little bit different from those competitors.
Right. And I think it's differentiation would be key there. But when we're talking about like marketing as it pertains to recruiting, they're really similar in that regard. So if you're talking about systems, you're so quick to qualify a lead based on job scope, right? You'll have a laundry list of things that a prospect needs to fit to be able to qualify as a lead. We should do that for candidates as well. We're so quick to create an incredibly robust list of demographic targets, right?
Expectation.
And you'll target your specific demographic for marketing and meta ads and Google advertisement, but you won't do that for your recruiting arm. But in the same context, it's automation as well that can make you more efficient and be systematic about it. Because in marketing, when we're talking about automation, it's the customer experience, but mostly you're talking about customer journey. I would implore companies to take a look at that exactly like marketing.
Yeah.
Map out the customer journey. What is it? Because we always say that Grosso University can handle everything from phone call to install. And that's advising you on those different processes within those different departments of your organization, whether it's your call center or the handoff from the call center to the sales rep, to production when they've made a sale, and production back to your customer experience team and things of that nature. But do that from a recruiting standpoint. You'd probably, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm just assuming this. If you applied that to your recruiting arm where you said, this candidate from here, but then make it custom to each individual platform you're running on, you'd probably see a lot of success there. Right?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many things out there, and there's that common excuse of like the talent market is so dry right now. And it's really not. It's just people aren't willing to go outside of the comfort zone of the post and pray method. I mean, there's been times where we campaign old candidates. I'm talking candidates that applied 1 to 2 years ago. You drip email campaign them, hey, we have this new opportunity, make it look, really fun and exciting, where they want to at least hear out the opportunity. You get a few leads from that. And that's just utilizing already paid for resources, right? And similarly, cross recruiting is huge. I mean, how many times have we gotten, a production, a candidate for a production role, and they have, entry level sales experience, and we cross recruited them to start in Canvas versus in production. And hey, because this company, is so flexible, you may be able to start here and, move into that other role, down the road, because, in this industry, we like to grow, we like to try different things. And, as long as they're given the tools and resources, there should be no reason why we can't cross-utilize resources.
Yeah, absolutely. But, there's kind of a fine line between, we're talking about post and pray, but I call it the spray and pray tactic, where you're just literally hiring everybody that comes within. You got to be very systematic with your actual qualifying parameters so that you don't get bogged down by people that aren't going to be a good cultural fit or a good role fit and different things like that.
I see that all too often when you have really high headcount goals. I mean, we've been there as working together. At some point you get so much pressure that you're just like, okay, we're going to hire, and it's not necessarily for the right intention. So it's really important that no matter what place you're in, that you're really hiring with intentionality, right? Because you also have to think about that manager's time. We learned this the hard way. I mean, a lot of this stuff we're talking about, we learned the hard way. We learned by doing.
A lot of cost prohibitive trial and error. Exactly. Right.
But you think about, like, if you have this never-ending cycle of people coming in, instead of you hire 5 people that probably aren't qualified in comparison to the one person could have been really solid that you brought in. Those 5 people turn over. Now you're just going in this wheel, and that manager that should be focused on the team is only focused on new hires. Like all of their time and attention, it's just constantly on new hires. And that's why then people also fall off, because they're not getting the time and attention on their employment. Them being here doesn't mean that they're like happy and motivated. They need somebody to help them get there.
And I'm not afraid to say that there were times in my career when I realized that I was just a glorified interviewer, right? Because I didn't have any system to what I was doing. I was like 6, 7, 8 interviews a day.
Yeah.
The leadership at our organization was the type of people that are going to make really ridiculous demands, and I was just the person who had to do it at all costs, right? So you got to be cognizant of that with your team members and make sure that your recruiters don't get burned out as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
So when we're talking about job ads in general, so a very short, brief question that I have for you is, because I know that we were in a position where we were hiring the same markets in the same role. It's literally like a revolving door. Like you said, there's a lot of churn at the bottom of the pile, right? Because it's sales and marketing. If you don't perform, you're going to be out. But you have to replace those people if you want to scale. Not only replace, but multiply. And if you look at it in that, you're going to be running the same job ads. You're going to be running the same areas of people. you're going to be getting, sometimes they even forget that they worked for you and they'll apply to it again. It's crazy. How do you keep that stuff fresh and how do you keep that relevant?
It's a really good question. And I think a lot of companies actually face this. If you have that never ending wheel of turnover, it's really hard to attract talent, especially if you have these people that check Indeed frequently or a job board frequently and they see the same ad over and over and over again. It really does hurt that brand. So that's why it is super important.
That's how you get those negative reviews that we're talking about.
It is super important that, employees or candidates are seeing fresh things. And I think things that we've tried in the past to try to get around that is you kind of, create another like title for the same job and you're kind of like spiffing it into something else, which it's a good tactic. It definitely works if you have the right job description. But it is something, realistically, if I'm trying to give advice here, don't go that route. Don't be that never-ending cycle, right? Because, again, the employer brand is huge, and that's how we're going to attract more people. And the more that we can focus on that standardized process, that structure, that baseline, the better we can be. Now, granted, you're always going to have turnover. Canvassing isn't a glorious job. Nobody wants to knock doors for the rest of their lives. If they do, kudos to you.
That's good. It's not, in the sun, fresh air, you get cussed out every day.
but turnover is going to happen, and especially in home improvement, it happens probably at a higher percentage than any other industry or other industries, I should say. So it's not, you're not gonna ever get away from it, but it's important that you're building a structure and a baseline to really, shoot yourself in the right direction. And again, you can have those ads posted all the time, but it's not a good look.
And that's kind of what I was alluding to, because over time, and correct me if I'm wrong, obviously those ads become less and less effective. So you have to rely on those channels we were talking about, from referrals, word of mouth, media, guerrilla recruiting. If somebody really goes above and beyond service, even if it's at a sub shop, right? If they make a great sub for you, like, thanks, have a nice day. And they have a great attitude. Looking at it from all lenses at all times. I constantly had cards, and then me and you created a program when we were there as well, where we made those cards, because that was
you impressed me cards.
You impressed me cards, right? So it was just more of, as those ads got stale, tacking on different tactics that were going to push the really lucrative forms of recruiting that really worked at the end of the day. Because you need a ton of resources. It's almost like nurturing leads to work on these huge platforms. And you're up against the behemoths at that point, right? And then you have to also take into consideration that, if you don't have that robust recruiting arm that's going to be diving into that bucket every single day and treating it like a revolving nurture list, you're probably not going to be successful there. So what can you do from a business standpoint to really set yourself up for that success? But not only that, once you've landed those recruits, how are you going to keep them in the fold as well? So another important part of the recruiting process is going to be obviously the interview, right? It's almost like a showmanship mentality. I always thought it was when I was doing interviews, when I was the glorified interviewer. I had a set script for my interviews and with transitions. But what I was trying to do is create an environment that was equally dissuasive as it was persuasive. And what I mean by that is, I was trying to grill them like I would for any other really high-ranking job, so they took the job seriously, right? Those are your typical questions, like, if you were in this scenario, how do you conduct yourself? Or, tell me about a time when this.
Grill set.
Exactly. So you'd have your behavioral assessment questions, just boom, 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 and you kind of grill them a little bit. Dissuasive. But then once you narrow down, maybe after 20 minutes of just grilling them, right? You'd narrow down that they were a really good candidate. They had a great personality. They could think on their feet. They were good at answering questions. I'd move into what would be more persuasive, and that's selling the role, selling the position. I used to have visual aids for that type of stuff. I'd have like funnels that would say, this is your path to 100K as a door knocker, and here's your path to 150K, whatever that may be. And then you'd have your case studies, case studies. I used to have managers that went as far as like black their information out on their paychecks. They were like, look at this $20,000 paycheck, and it's just because at that point, seeing is believing.
Yeah.
But you have to have, tell me how important it is, do you think, to having that set process where you're not only, vetting that person, but then setting yourself up to really land them, much like a sale.
Yeah, well, like I said, after the interview, if all is well, if you can get an accepted candidate, in the door, but it doesn't mean anything if you can't retain them. And so I think that's super important, is to be able to, talk about the reality, talk about what this role actually involves, but then also entice them with the exciting things. And again, going back to, why are you looking for a role, and what can this business or what can this role do for you? We have to lean into that, and there's got to be a balance between both, because you don't want to oversell and underpromise, and you don't want to also just have an interview where you're just grilling them the entire time, and then they don't accept the interview.
Right, and then that disconnect from the person who's interviewing, or the recruiting team, and the actual people who are going to be doing the training. So what I did was systematically approach both. And that visual aid that we were talking about from, it was a funnel that kind of funneled everything down to how much money they could make. I built that into the training. So I had an overview training, as you well know. We had an overview training that we, systematized over there as well, where that would be built right into the training. You tell them about your historical business, awards, and why you're the place to work, and why customers choose us above anybody else. It's almost like a company story at the beginning of your sales process. You're still in sales mode in that first day, that first week of them being an employee there. They obviously have to bring, and I always talk to people in an interview like this, it's a 50-50 proposition for me. You have to bring 50%, I'll bring 50%. What we're going to do as a company is we're going to have the brand recognition, we're going to have the culture, we're going to have the fit, we're going to have the training and the resources. That's my 50%. What you're going to need to bring is your work ethic, your motivation, your good attitude, and your not quit, can do attitude. And we put that 50% together, you're going to be successful. But then matching that with a training overview that you do systematically over the first week, 2 weeks, and sometimes more.
It's all about fluidity. I mean, whatever you can bring to the interview and then also shed light into the actual experience is super important.
Yep.
I think specifically within some of the interviews that I've, sat on and shadowed as well, the candidates are interviewing you just as much as you're interviewing them. So it's really important for you to kind of place yourself in that setting, and really, if you were a candidate interviewing for this position, what would entice you, and what would you absolutely need to know so that you don't get smacked in the face with the brutal reality, on the first day.
Yeah. And I always, we're talking about interviews where they're kind of interviewing you as well. But this is just more out of curiosity. It's just a quick question. There are certain red flags that I have during the interview process that would exclude people. One of them I've been a little bit more lenient on recently is what they know about the organization. I'd always ask them what they know about, but they're applying to like 20 jobs. We're talking about the turnstile nature of those Indeed platforms.
It's really tough. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, and I get a lot of feedback often, even though in my process, when a recruiter reaches out to the candidate and they do the phone screening and, they decide to move forward to the next steps, their communication, their email confirmation has literally the links in there. Click here, do your research. The recruiter should be vetting them to make sure that they come prepared. So you're going to say
I'm being soft on these people by letting them...
No, not every recruiter, will prep them for that. They just expect it because that's how things did happen. But
back in the day, you were super prepared. You had your
this day and age, I'll tell you, it's different. People, the amount of
virtual, people, you'll have people on with sweatshirts. What are we allowing these days?
And the amount of people that let's just make this a reality, but no-shows are crazy now. The newer age of individuals, and again,
I have found that my virtual show rate for interviews has really been great.
I will say virtual is huge. I think you miss a little bit of the in-person stuff, but I think being on camera still provides you with that same.
And I think we had a strict stipulation at Mad City when we were doing it that they needed to come into the office, and then you'd have
you're hurting your chances with that as well, because some people live far away. They might be working, like these good people that we want, they are probably working another job, and you're asking them to now take off of work, or maybe their business is super, not flexible.
And this is going to date us. We were at like the beginning of like virtual interviews at that time.
Oh yeah, I don't even think for a while we had a platform to do video interviews.
That's so funny. Oh my God, I couldn't think about it. I remember taking phone interviews with Matt in the car all the time, because that's pretty much my entire job, was driving.
But it's crazy. I mean, the amount of, like I was saying, the no-shows, like people just don't even have the respect after you just spent, an hour on the phone.
How do you, like, for the people that are listening, how do we, and, maybe just bullet point quickly, like, how do you think you get that show rate up? Because I know there's people on this call right now, they're like, I can't pay people to get here.
Recruiting's relationship building.
Mm-hmm.
You are going to have people that just don't show up, but I think it's not only how you're presenting yourself on the phone, but it's also the extra touch points. As much as, it's one of those things where, do you want to send them a text and remind them to come to the interview? Like, they should know that already. Or
we can automate all that stuff right now. Yes. I think, again, it goes back to our customer journey being applied to recruiting.
You usually do all of that within the ATS.
Consistent processes breed consistent results. So Absolutely. If it's a predictable funnel at that point, right? Because if you would drop, how much money do people drop on recruiting, and then they don't treat it systematically like that? It's kind of crazy. We're kind of beating up the front end of the recruiting process, but it's all for naught unless you're able to retain those, exactly like you said before. And, I think that's what we did as a good job. There was an awesome handoff there. We had communication. Alignment in terms of the overview and then the training. But then just the onboarding in general. It'd be a systematic checklist. It's almost like you're moving from a sales and marketing side to an ops side, where it's all check boxes. Yeah. Like, you got to take care of each and everything. It's apparel, it's their equipment, it's the training, and you
want them to feel like you know what you're doing. I think all too often people just kind of go by the seat of their pants. They make these hires, and then all of a sudden it's the first day and they have no plan other than, I'm going to make them watch this onboarding, or I'm going to have them sit with HR. Yep. I'm going to have them do these trainings, and I'm going to get them a sweatshirt.
Yep. Yep. I remember my first training in the home improvement industry. I literally had a DVD, again, dating myself, but a DVD was put into the overhead, and I watched it. And that was it. It was Rick Grosso. It was, Yes, You Are a Closer. Yeah. Put it in. It was the 11-step sales selling process. And that we use to this day.
10 at that time.
It was 10. We added the 11th. Yeah. Well, the 11th is just working out and getting jacked, right? But so 10-step selling process, you're absolutely correct. And so they put that in, and I got the printed off version of it by none other than Rick Grosso. He visited us a couple times within the first year of my employment there. And the training really consisted of just watching those DVDs and then riding along with Dom, drinking energy drinks and goofing around at people's houses, right? And, luckily for us, the process didn't matter how we delivered. That process was always what reigned pretty supreme. Consumers are getting smarter now, and, you have to have your employees dialed in. But not only that, because employees that are dialed in, they feel confident in your company and what you're providing them, will always look better on the front end to the customer as well. So, that's kind of when we, me, you, Dom, working together in all of our departments, started communicating and crafting different things from a training perspective. Like, you came on board, you were getting a 90-day plan. You were getting links to all the resources. That would include training manuals. That would include company contact lists, like everything that you would need as a source of truth for that organization right when they onboarded, so that we were making sure that they felt very comfortable. Again, it's a leap of faith, right? Yeah,
and it's, training is training. You probably have a system in place. but from that point, then it's touch points, at the end of the week. It's not just have a good weekend. It's how do you feel about everything that's happened at the end of 2 weeks, at the end of 3 weeks, at the end of 4 weeks. And then at the end of 4 weeks, I mean, if you're a canvasser, if you're a sales rep, you should be feeling pretty sure good about what you're doing.
And also knowing who has accountability for that feedback. Is it their manager? Is it the recruiting department? Is it HR that's nurturing this person?
And that's actually, technology again you can do so much with it. I mean, I've worked with platforms where you can send, surveys to people automatically based upon their start date, right?
Right.
And so you can do a lot of that, and that actually helps you find trends from the HR standpoint of where we might be, dropping things, where we need to put a little bit more attention to. Okay, so we hired this person a week after they're hired. How did you feel about your TA experience? How did you feel about your hiring manager? Is your hiring manager living up to what they said in the interview? And that's where you can kind of start to peel back the onion and figure out, where does the system need a little bit extra help?
Right.
How can we, make things better?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where it comes in too with GU recruiting and, GU digital and marketing and our mentorship and our coaching. Is if you don't have structures for that right now, again, we had a lot of cost prohibitive trial and error. We were lucky that we were scaling so fast that, we could make a lot of mistakes and they'll be hidden a little bit, right?
Hey, they always say though, the best growth is through mistakes. So
yeah, exactly.
I'm happy for it.
Exactly. So we have all that mapped out here for you. You don't need to make the same mistakes that we did. You don't have to have the growing pains. We have the 90-day plans. We have the onboarding. We have the training. And we can advise you on that customer journey or that hiring journey, if you will, that employee journey that would help your organization really scale fast. Now, we have this onboarding window for the first 30 days. I think they're the most important time period for any employee. I say 90 days, but 30 days is really that kind of crucial time period where it's not about performance, it's about development. They need to have realistic, truthful feedback through the first 30 days. And this is where you hit the nail on the head earlier when you're saying we just take the canvasser and we elevate him into the managerial role and he doesn't know how to manage. You got to make sure that the person that you have leading the program knows how to give feedback, knows how to do reviews, knows how to do
even actually has the time to do so.
That is accurate. Yeah. So it's really conducive to the people in the environment, to the training, not only of the staff, so they feel comfortable, but the leadership to make sure they have the resources to be able to elevate that person.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. So it's about coaching, people development. You build people and people build the business. That was Zig Ziglar, right? Yeah. And it rings true. Rest in peace. Yeah. It rings true even to this day, and it's one of the most important things in business. We're not a sales and marketing organization. We're a people development organization, and that starts with day one, the 30th day, the 90th day.
First year.
Exactly. It never ends, so you have to be accountable to that. But then knowing where recruiting has a handoff to the managerial and development staff or the trainers in your organization and who's conducting, you got to stay on top of those. I remember you guys saying, to me, when we were at Mad City, it's like, you have 20 reviews due it by the end of the week. And I'm like, oh, no.
They added up quick.
Oh, no. But, when you have 200 employees or 300 in your department, you do the math on that. You're conducting, a dozen reviews to 20, 30 reviews every single month.
Well, best practice, again, I think some of the things we did, we grew way too fast with little resources, but really from a leadership end.
Also put some layers in, so I don't have to do every damn thing.
That's what I was going to say is, good leadership, you only have so much bandwidth, and a good leader should only really truthfully see no more than 7-8 people at a time.
Yeah.
Because you think about that, in order to keep that, machine running, you need to be able to be in the field. You also need to be able to be giving ongoing coaching and development. And then you also need to be bringing new people in. Yeah. So in order to successfully do that and create the experience that people need, you can't do it all.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, that's a good, I guess, 2 cents is when you're building and leveling your company out, really sit back and think about what is doable and what experience you want it to look like. And I think that's something that I wanted to definitely share with the team here is kind of going back to what I mentioned before is I truly challenge everybody on this webinar to take a look at their customer experience from the time that you guys, are on the marketing side all the way through to the, even the install. Look at how you're cultivating that, and then compare that to what you currently have for your employee onboarding or employee recruiting, process. And I think you're going to be very surprised to see that you probably treat your customer engagement way better than your employee engagement.
Undoubtedly.
And that should speak volumes, because your employees are going to give an even better customer experience. So it's important that we feed into them.
And everybody says, you got to spend money to make money. And they're talking about marketing as a revenue generator. They're talking about sales as a revenue generator. But what
recruiting is a revenue
recruiting
generator.
is the only revenue generator, right? Unless you're going to be working in your business instead of on your business. If you're going to be the type of owner that runs the sales appointments, installs the jobs, knocks on doors. I know people who run businesses like that. That's not scalable. You're going to hit a certain point and you're not going to be able to grow. But you have to take a look at it in terms of, just really developing people. And we're people developers. That's your only revenue generator at the end of the day, right?
Absolutely.
So if we flip our thinking in terms of revenue generation and people development, and that being the number one driver of driving revenue, I think a lot of people would change how they conduct themselves with that, like, employee journey, if we want to call that. So we were talking about the first 90 days and onboarding, right? And then you get somebody who has the basic foundation of knowledge, right? You build that basic foundation. It's kind of like you're building everything that they're going to need to know to be successful. And then it's really about nurturing that, so the finer elements as you move along. Now, one of the biggest things I see in a lot of the organizations that I am working with is their inability to have a conversation with that wrap up, give them feedback that gets them to the next level, right? So, and the reason for that is because they're just kind of throwing them out to the wolves. They do this great onboarding, this great training for the first 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. But say that person starts to struggle after 60 days. They have what we call, like, they shoot off like a rocket, right? You're like, okay, this is it. There you go, Johnny Canvasser. You're good to go, man.
Yeah.
You're going to be good forever. And then that person doesn't have the resources nor the mentorship that they need to continuously be successful. And they start looking around and they don't see themselves in this thing long term. Yeah. And that's almost worse when you've put all that resource into training, the recruiting, hiring, and training. What do you think is the most important part as it pertains to the performance and feedback and continuous improvement?
Communication, no doubt. I mean, like I said, touch points are so vital. I know some people feel kind of silly doing them. Yeah. Whether it's stay interviews or, 30, 60, 90-day reviews or just general touch points. I think they're so important because, especially in this industry, you do kind of let people go and do their thing. And outside of like having specific performance metrics that you can hold people to and being able to have those conversations based on those plans, which I think is a weakness of some. They don't have, set sturdy plans to work with. People want to know how they're doing. And honestly, a lot of people in the sales and canvassing, realm, they want encouragement. They want to be told that they're doing a good job, or, hey, here's some feedback. Now let's implement this and I'll help you get there. So I think it's so important, whether or not you think it's silly. I know, in my
I definitely do not. Like, if it's kind of crazy because I always tell managers, let's just keep it on the canvas track here. I always tell managers, if you sit down with somebody and you have a poor review, or, God forbid, you're there to terminate the individual, you're there to let them go and part ways, and they have literally no idea why they're sitting there, you've not done your job. That's more on you than it is that
I drove that home, I know, with Mad City. It's like, nobody should ever look like the deer in the headlights when they're being given a term, like they're
there should have been a systematic approach. It's, again, going back to the systems. We have it all templated where, I'm working with companies right now, and I have to work with the managers on how we do PIPs and performance improvement plans and how we give that feedback. I always talk about eating the frog, right? Have you ever heard this? Mark Twain has a quote that says, if the first thing you do every day is eat a frog, then the rest of the day, I'm paraphrasing. It's not exact, right?
Yeah.
But the rest of the day is going to be a lot more pleasant, right? And what that means is having your difficult conversations first, because then you get that out of the way. And the person that you're dealing with you're not doing them justice by like, oh, you see him in the hallway and you do this thing right here. You're like, oh no, Johnny hasn't set a lead in 75 days, you know? Like,
yeah, I mean, I think we're also in a day and age where people are just scared of conflict. Like they don't want to have to face the conflict. But a lot of people actually appreciate when you give them feedback versus not giving them feedback.
No, and I've had a lot of conversations with canvassers or marketers or just sales reps in general where you meet with them and you say like, you know, you were doing fantastic, you know, but we are on a streak of you like underperforming. We're going to need to see you improve. The good news is I love to see you improve. I'd love to see you succeed. Yeah. This is what we need to do for you to get there. I've had a lot of conversations with people and they're like, I'm glad you brought this up, man. I didn't want to say anything. I didn't know how I was going to get there.
Yeah, I think performance management is all about knowing the person that you're working with, right? And being able to, you know, provide the feedback in a way that's not like making them walk out crying, right? You want it to be productive and you want it to be feedback that they can take and run with and know that they have you to support on. Yeah. I think all too often we kind of just like tell them they have a problem and then like go fix it, right? Where we should be as a leader, as somebody that focuses on development. Here's your problem. What do you think I can do to help you? Or what do you think the team can do to help you? And how do we work on this together?
And making sure there's not a disconnect there, because again, we go back to know the way, show the way, go the way. If you're not going the way, if you're not leading by example, that one-on-one is going to be brutal. Yeah. Because they'll be like, what the hell why are you telling me this? Yeah. Like, you don't have any idea what I'm going through out there. You're sitting in here. Yeah. Your feet are up on your desk every time I come in here, right? Yeah. So you got to be in the trenches. You got to be able to shadow and lead there. So the person that's giving the feedback they can't be too far removed, right? Absolutely. No, when it comes to the developing that feedback, it's always a good and pleasant situation. We're always thinking about it way too much before it happens. And then you usually come out with a very good understanding of where you stand, which is also a very pleasant thing to know, but what you need in a roadmap to get to where you need to improve, because the worst case scenario, we always want that person to succeed. It's not like we want them to fail. They went through a process where you said, yep, you'd be right for the job. They said, yep, you'd be right for my career. And why would you want to mess that up?
Yeah. And what a lot of people don't understand, or they just don't have the time to actually think about, is that one conversation where you try to steer back on track is way cheaper and way less time, saving than having to go back and restart and put them through an entire training. And, so if you can really get on their level and meet them where they are and help cultivate them to where they need to be, that's far more time saving. That's far more cost effective. And honestly, I mean, I was telling Dom this when we were talking, like in this area, a lot of these positions have like your standardized bonuses, that you can aim for. But what's gold in this business, and what I think is so surprising, is the ability for somebody to be so much more excited about a $50 gift card that you throw out randomly in comparison to their $1,000 monthly bonus. Yeah. But it's just those little things that you throw in there randomly, and you keep the energy alive within the team, right? Yeah. So,
well, it is all about culture, and if you're that culture of feedback, because that's another thing. If you come across as hypocritical, you're not giving them resources, and then you sit down and have a review.
It's hard for them to trust you.
I've literally never seen a manager in my entire career that says, I love giving one-on-ones. Yeah. So you have to have some accountability or checks and balances in your different departments, where maybe HR recruiting holds the manager accountable for conducting those things. Like it's a weekly bump. Yeah. Johnny needs his review, or Johnny needs his one-on-one.
And technology can do a lot of that. If you invest in the right systems, I mean, the technology will do the bumps for you.
Yeah. And we have scorecards that if somebody falls below a certain metric of performance, you're like, okay, we're doing a PIP, or we're doing some feedback. Like maybe it's not as something extreme as a performance improvement plan. There's got to be measures before that, because I always hate companies that will just automatically throw somebody on a PIP, because whenever somebody comes into my office and they
Hear the word PIP.
yeah, they just fly off the handle. Performance improvement plan. This is like, but they're seeing it as, you do this or I'm going to fire you, right?
Yep.
And
Negative context.
it's a negative context, but in itself, those words, performance improvement plan, like, have something before that. Maybe call it something different, because people associate
Whatever you want, honestly.
pre-firing. I'm covering my end so that you can't sue me when I fire you. That's, and that's what everybody sees that as. But that feedback should have been happening for so long before.
Yeah, but that's all about the management development, right? Like, we should not, like, our people should not see a performance improvement plan as that. We need to be able to rephrase it, and they need to be on track to know that this is just something we're implementing, whether it's form related or not, to help you go further. And that's how we have to rewind things, where whenever you sit down with a manager, it's not negative. It could be positive. It could be, let's work on this together.
Yeah.
But everything we do, when you don't have the structure and when you don't integrate that into your culture of, like, it is normal for you to have one-on-ones and to talk about pros and cons and wins and losses, it becomes so negative. And people just expect it to be negative if it's not, something that they're used to doing frequently.
Yeah, and definitely. I think it's feedback and just being upfront and accountable for feedback. But I think, correct me if I'm wrong, in recruiting, it's the same way. If you were to work with a company, and you'd probably do an assessment in the beginning, right? You're going to work with a company, you're getting an assessment, a lay of the land on their processes, their recruiting processes. It stands right now. But if they don't fit, you're probably not going to jump in and do business with them if they don't.
I'm setting myself up for failure.
Exactly. So, but we can advise you on that. So we can give you systems, processes, so you maybe even a checklist to be ready, the readiness questionnaire or assessment.
Yeah.
That if you do all of these things, you could employ our services. Right?
Yeah. Right? And I think that's kind of already built in is we want to make sure that when we take on new clients that, they're open to change. I'm not saying you have to make change, but you're open to change if it's needed. And you're open to us not just coming in and recruiting for you, but you're open to us, like, peeling back the onion and seeing, okay, we've had 5 declined offers. What's going on here? They're getting into your interview, but now they're not getting across the finish line.
Well, and the beauty of that is, from Grosso's standpoint, we can be as hands-on or as hands-off as possible, as you want. And you could have a rep. That's what I think is the coolest part is, if your head's kind of spinning a little bit at the conversation here, you're just like, well, I have to create another marketing department. I have to create another customer experience department. This sounds overwhelming. Yeah. What's cool about Grosso is we're going to tie everything together, right? We're going to tie everything together from that recruiting to the initial training, so that you have, from step 1 to them going out into the field and doing their first shadows and different things like that, pitching customers. We're able to handle all that stuff. Yeah. And eventually, it's better if you teach somebody to, fish as opposed to catch fish for them. So we have different services that we could provide to customers, clients, that would allow them to build their own recruiting arms in their organization. So now that we've kind of summarized the entire process, what it really boils down to is how to retain your top performers. And that's kind of your legacy employees, the ones that make the wheels turn. And, that's really done by incentive-based, because, it's the 3 C's. I like to say it's the 3 C's: clarity, culture, and compensation, right? And it's clarity. We already talked enough about that. Yeah. It's just being concise on your feedback, but also being very clear on what they need to do to be successful. And then culture in general, culture of consistency. I think you could be at 4. That's the 4th C. Yeah. So I feel like culture is such a buzzword. It's not buying pizza. Yeah. It's not doing things like that on a Friday. It's about consistency. Yes. Consistency in everything that you do, like knowing the way, showing the way, going the way, right? Yeah. And then you talk about the compensation. Let's face it, folks. You got to be Alex Hormozy. I think that's how you pronounce his last name, but he's an entrepreneur and kind of a guru in the industry. You'll see him. He's always wearing this nose strip. Have you ever seen his videos? No. He's got a big beard. He's massive. Yeah. But he wears Alex Hormozy. I think that's how you say it. But he's talking about compensation and how the biggest arbitrage opportunity for people as we move through 2025 is paying people above market value.
Yeah.
So you can secure that talent. And that's the biggest thing, is the 3 C's that I'd like to get out to everybody, is that clarity, culture, compensation. You can't be afraid to pay people what they're worth. That's what I want to wrap it up here.
Absolutely.
Because all of that stuff we just talked about, if you're not willing to pony up for top talent or people that have a great attitude, maybe they don't have the requisite experience, but they have experience in some other sales arena or customer service. They have a great personality. Sometimes you can get away with having entry-level type employees that have no experience, right? If they have the right personality. But you can't be afraid to pay up for top talent, right? So when we're talking about retaining top talent, now, God forbid you do have some turnover, we talked about it. We're going to end on this, the exit interview, right? Because I think people that are listening on, right, because you've had, your background is HR and recruiting.
Yep.
You're always doing exit interviews at a company like Mad City because you have so much turnover.
Yeah.
What are some of your insights to wrap it up here? What are some of your insights that you have? What are, like, if you lose top talent or you lose talent,
Yes.
what are some of the top reasons why people are leaving organizations right now?
Well, before I answer that question, I kind of want to tap into like what we're doing with exit interviews. And I think it kind of ties into, my relationship with Dom, my relationship with you. You need close alignment. You need trust between all parties. You can't be separate pillars in the business. If you're separate pillars, you're going to act very transactional. There's not going to be anything that comes from that. So I think with exit interviews, like, that's a feedback session. Now, you have to take them with a grain of salt because exit interviews don't always go the best if the employees aren't happy. That's why I think
A little bit emotional.
Stay interviews are also important to get a grasp on people who are currently employed and haven't put notices in and who aren't leaving. But taking that feedback and really doing something with it. It shouldn't be just a checkbox in the exit. It should be, okay, how can we utilize this information to better our business?
Right.
But to answer your question, as far as the, reasons why people leave, I think first and foremost, number one is going to be because they find a better opportunity. So that's, again, where it comes to the brand management, the experience, what we're doing as leaders to coach and develop. All of those pieces are going to keep people from looking elsewhere, and they're going to keep people retained. I would say number two then is probably income or unhappiness with managers.
Yeah, people don't leave jobs, they leave managers.
Bad managers. Yeah, people don't leave bad jobs, they leave bad managers.
But that's the same thing. Everybody makes mistakes, right? We're not going to win 100% of the time. We're not going to win them all, right? When we haven't won, taking that feedback, you got to be you got to have some humility in this business because like we said, we made a lot of mistakes. I'd like to go back and say, like, younger Josh, don't take everything so personally. When you're doing exit interviews, don't take everything so personally because that's a growth opportunity. Now, the way that you need to have the framework, just doled out for those exit interviews is, again, it's about communication. What do you do with that information? Because data without any action is worthless.
Yeah.
Right?
I think it's about ownership, right? Extreme Ownership is probably one of my favorite books that I, utilize lessons for daily.
Shout out Jotham, right?
Yeah, it's, really taking the information that's presented to you, and instead of like getting mad about it or placing blame on someone else, which I think in my younger years, I definitely took it very personally. And like, it was like a shoot against me, but it's actually owning it, realizing that you aren't perfect and that this is a way to learn a lesson for the future and steer the ship in a different direction.
Because even if it's emotional in that exit interview, there's a semblance of truth. There's probably a middle
situation.
Right?
In every situation, there's something you can take out of it.
A lot of the times you can get better, but if it is they just received a better opportunity, they didn't have room for growth in your organization, sometimes it just wasn't meant to be. But if you have growth opportunities that feed back to your managers, the people that are conducting the training, the one-on-ones, like, if you see things it's about accountability at that point too. So now we're gonna wrap it up here. I know obviously we've covered a lot of different things, right? From recruiting best practices to gain not only quantity but quality candidates, your onboarding processes that need to be systematic, your training that needs to be systematic and ongoing, and then that feedback, regular feedbacks, touch points, reviews, one-on-ones, different things like that. Now, dial all that stuff in. What's really great and why I was so excited to talk about this with Karli is her experience is vast in that regard. We got GU recruiting, we have GU digital, we have marketing platforms, we have sales platforms, we have our sales masterclass. So again, what we say is from phone call to install, like we allow people to work on every area of their business, but not only that, create an environment where it's not siloed and they can work cohesively together. Because recruiting is all about it's about every part of your organization.
Yeah.
I mean, as soon as you talk about recruiting for Canvas and you got a robust Canvas team, or you got enough sales reps to field those leads and close the leads, now you're looking for installers in the back end.
Yeah.
And that's a completely different topic. We could probably go on about for hours and hours is recruiting talent in terms of your install and your production team.
Yeah.
But in each one of those pathways or processes is going to be different for each one of those departments in your organization. We can give you that feedback. We can tell you what worked for us, building $100 million, $200 million, $400 million organizations, and give you that feedback and that mentorship so you don't have to make those same mistakes that we did in the beginning. And again, thanks for joining us. It was a pleasure. And, we appreciate you guys taking time out of your day to join us to have this important discussion about recruiting. And as always, at Grosso University, yes, you are a closer.